Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Belinda Gibbons and I have the absolute pleasure today of, helping Karen and Anne chair the Sustainable Healthy Eating Hour. Very big thank you to Karen and Anne for running this session. Before I hand over, I would like to pay an acknowledgement to the absolutely beautiful country from which all our foods come from. So I would like to acknowledge the country for Indigenous peoples is an interconnected set of ancient and sophisticated relationships. The University of Wollongong in Australia spreads across many interrelated Aboriginal countries that are bound by this sacred landscape and intimate relationships with that landscape since creation. From Sydney to the Southern Highlands to the South Coast, from fresh water to bitter water, to salt, from city to rural, the University of Wollongong acknowledges the custodianship of the Aboriginal peoples of this place and the space that has kept alive the relations between all living things. The university acknowledges the devastating impact of colonialisation on our campus's footprint and commits ourselves to truth-telling, healing, research and education. It is with great pleasure that I am going to hand today's session over to Karen and Anne, and I believe they're going to have a bit of a chat to us first and then take us through this amazing recipe. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Belinda, and welcome everyone. We're very pleased to have this session. We feel food is absolutely essential to consider in terms of our climate action strategies. So I'm just going to share a short presentation before we kick off with our cooking demo. So let me just set the scene for you. As Belinda has mentioned, Anne and myself are going to run this session for you, and we're both accredited practicing dietitians, and we're both from the nutrition and dietetics discipline, which is in the School of Medicine in the SMAR faculty. So I just want to put some facts out so we all know where we're standing here. It's been said that we need nothing less than a great food transformation to enable our food system to continue and to meet planetary health boundaries. So what do I mean by this? If we want to continue to eat and sustain human life on Earth, if we want our grandchildren to be able to eat in a healthy and sustainable way, we're going to have to change the way we interact with food. There's absolutely no argument about it. So why is this? Well, first of all, our global population is expected to reach almost 10 billion by 2050, so in our lifetimes. So that means we're going to have to produce, or the planet's going to have to produce, between 70 and 100% more food. Remember, the resources are finite, but we have to almost double our current food production to feed the increasing number of people that are going to be on the planet. Our current food system is leading to malnutrition. First of all, we've got almost 2 billion people, adults, that are overweight or obese. They're eating too much and too much of the wrong foods. But we still have horrible figures such as 45% of deaths in infants in various countries linked to undernutrition. So we've got this, this terrible dichotomy between under and overnutrition, but all known as malnutrition. And then our food system also contributes to greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity loss, and other important indicators of climate change. So we need to look at our food system as a whole. In terms of resources, the food system also uses about 70% of available fresh water. And of course, in a country such as Australia, that can be problematic. We all know about water scarcity. So this figure here is to try and show you the interaction between planetary boundaries, so the natural resources available to our planet to grow and produce food, and the health boundaries, because we all need to be eating in a more healthy way to improve health. So great challenges, great challenges we have. Some of you may have heard of the Eat Lancet Planetary Health Diet. So this was released in 2019 in the Lancet journal, which is the top medical journal in the world. And this new way of eating was suggested to be the new or to be the diet that is most aligned with a sustainable way of eating. And what you might notice straight up is that vegetables or fruit and vegetables take up 50% of the plate, and you can see this tiny slither of animal sourced protein here. Whereas most of us, if we go to an Australian barbecue, you know, maybe 3/4 of the plate is taken up with a big steak and maybe a potato and a lettuce leaf on the side. But I just want to say up front, this is mostly plant-based, this suggested way of eating, but it doesn't have to be vegetarian or vegan. It's something we call flexitarian. So when we think of the food system as a whole, there are many subsystems to it, from both production to processing to distributing the food and selling the food, of course, waste along the way, and then consumption of humans. Oh, sorry, I went the wrong way. I was supposed to go that way. Waste is at the end of the, of course, we have to consume the food before we can waste it. So what we're going to focus on today is just this green area of the food system as a whole. Otherwise, it becomes too massive a job to, it's kind of mind-blowing, if you like. So what can we do as individuals to make sure that we can change our eating behaviors to be more healthy and at the same time more sustainable? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I've put up this picture. It's a little bit hard to see, but there is a copy in the link. This is a graphic from my colleague over at Monash University, Liza Barber, and she's actually come up with 13 diet-related practices that will lead to a more sustainable way of eating. So first of all, where do we source our food? That's really important, and that's going to be the first part of our little video. We're going to show you a local food co-op. You know, make sure it's being produced in a sustainable way. Try and eat locally. So where do you source your food? That's the first thing to think about. What do you eat? Try and avoid overconsumption, because that's a large waste of resources. Trying to increase more plant-based foods and reduce animal-derived foods. And then lastly, how to eat. So try and eat in a way that minimizes waste, and try and you know, prepare homemade meals as much as possible. So that's kind of the framework for today. If I can just tell you what's going to happen, we're going to visit a local food co-op in the rural. So Belinda's going to show us a little video about that. And then where I'm going to purchase the foods for our cooking demonstration. And then we're going to launch straight into the cooking demonstration. So if anybody is cooking along, that's great. Take some photos, post it on Twitter, or show us your kitchen. That would be excellent. If you're not going to cook along, that's okay. We have dialogue going, which hopefully will be entertaining for you to watch, and maybe we might inspire you to cook the meal afterwards. So it is a plant-based meal that has been chosen because it's low cost, easy to prepare, and quite delicious. And then we'll come back and finish off with a tour around the UOW Pulse Community Garden, because that sort of fits in with eating and growing local foods. And then after all of that, Anne and myself will be available for questions. So if you have questions along the way, just put them in the chat and we'll make sure we try and get to those by the end of the session. So thank you everyone for attending, and I'll hand back to Belinda because she's got the controls.
Thanks,
to the
Karen.
technology.
I'll try and get this tech to work. Could you just stop sharing the screen for me? Beautiful. All right. Hopefully everyone will be able to hear and see what we're running. So the first one will be where we're sourcing the food from.
So Susan, how long has the co-op been going for?
So it started about 10, just over 10 years ago,
Wow.
with a group of locals who got together and set up a buyers group for produce. Moved from their garage into a shop across the road, and then over here 4 years ago. Moving across from the other side into this bigger premises, we've been able to spread out, expand our range. We're a not-for-profit, a cooperative, which means it's a democratic system of governance. We have a very large pool of volunteers who come in and help us out. We have a group of paid staff as well. But yeah, so we're bulk items, low packaging, if not no packaging. Very little plastic in the shop. Fair Food Illawarra developed up these local signs. So they're all the products that are either made or produced or manufactured in the Illawarra. So there's lots of those labels around. And then we've got some that are still local but not in the Illawarra, so southern Sydney, and we've got Highlands eggs and that kind of thing.
All right, so I've got my little shopping list. Maybe we can have a look. So the first thing I need is red lentils.
Yes, so we've got pulses along the top here and the gravity feed. So yeah, just a matter of popping your bag under there, pulling down the lever and getting as much or as little as you like.
Red lentils. 2 onions. So looking for onions.
Onions down the front here, so we've got red and brown.
They're quite large today. Oh, they are.
So most of our produce is organic or chemical free. Well, we love organic and chemical free because it's gentler on the environment. It's not putting a lot of pesticides and chemicals into the environment. So it's a more sustainable way of farming, and it's getting, I think, more popular. That's 150. So then we just grab a clean scoop. And how much would you like?
Oh, 1 scoop's probably enough. Good. And I'm also looking for. Do you have garam masala?
Yes, we do. We get deliveries twice a week of both the local produce and the Sydney markets produce.
So this is. So do you go up to Sydney markets to get that?
They deliver.
Oh, they
Yes.
deliver.
But our local supplier, Harry from Harrods at Dapto, we love his stuff. He's got beetroot, silver beet, parsley, and lettuce, and comes from Dapto. So we love that. It's chemical free.
Greek yogurt.
So this one's sweetened.
No,
You don't want sweetened. So these are organic.
Big one.
The big one?
What, busy day? So that's a little bit. Is Friday your busiest?
Yeah, Friday and Saturday, I would say.
So let's go cooking.
Excellent. I don't know how many of you have been to the Planetary co-op there. It's an absolutely gorgeous shop. All right, Karen, you happy for me to move on to the next one? Did you want to say anything?
No, not at all. Let's go to the kitchen now.
Okay, I'm just going to, sorry, get my stuff together here. I'm just going to put the link, the recipe in the chat in case you want to have a look at what. And
While you're doing that, Belinda, we were hoping to promote sustainable picnics, but I'm looking out of the window and it's actually, I think, hailing at the moment. So we, as a discipline, cancelled our sustainable picnic today, and we're probably going to have it on the weekend. But if I can just give a plug for our URW Nutrition and Dietetics Association, our student group, they've come up with some really great recipe ideas, and hopefully we can give their Facebook link to you before the end of the session.
Thanks. I'll kick this off. And as it starts, please just have a flowing conversation in the chat. Just talk to each other, and yeah, ask questions or chat about the food. And I'll see if I can get this going. Thank you.
Welcome, Anne, to my kitchen. Today we're going to make something which is really easy but nutritious and also good for the planet. So our whole purpose today is to walk you through a meal that's nutritious, cheap, easy to make, but also one that you can be confident that you're eating in a sustainable and healthy way. So I'm really pleased that you're going to be able to help me, and what we're going to do is red lentil dal. So red lentil dal is made from red lentils. These are split lentils. And it's an Indian dish, so it's packed with flavour, and the beauty about it is you can just use one pot, cooks in about 25 minutes. You can make, the recipe makes 6, costs about $10 for the entire recipe, and you can freeze the leftovers, which is great as well, so there's no waste. And then you can add various things. So we're going to add rice today, basmati rice. And we're also going to try and make our own naan bread, which we haven't done before, so that'll be a little bit of an experiment. Well, I've tried it a number of times, and we actually tried it when we had our neighbourhood feast during lockdown. We went down our shared driveway and we each had a table down the driveway, and I got the thumbs up, so hopefully you're going to enjoy it as much as we did.
Another good point, share food. What a great way to actually meet, socialise and connect with food.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of that in lockdown. So one thing with lockdown is that, you know, we have been able to share. Our neighbours have given us, I'll just show you what we've been getting from our neighbours. We got this pickled red cabbage from next door. My husband made chili jam because we grow chilies, so we distributed that through the neighbourhood. I believe you spread your lemons around.
Yeah.
So it's another really good way to, you know, to not only be more sustainable, but also be more connected with your community.
Socially connected through food is the best.
So there have been some good outcomes from lockdown, which were probably unanticipated. And talking about that, there's also a theme this week about sustainable picnics, because obviously before we reached Freedom Day, the only time we could get together socially was to picnic. So again, more and more people are picnicking outdoors, which is lovely. And the beauty about that is that I've noticed people are actually making food to take to the picnics rather than just grabbing takeaways.
Yeah.
So there is going to be a link from our student association, Nutrition and Dietetics Student Association, and they're going to give us ideas of how to plan a sustainable picnic.
Oh, terrific. Let's all have a picnic. I love that idea.
So because we're going to do rice takes quite a long time. So can you just tell us what type of rice you've got and how you're going to cook it?
So I've got basmati rice, which is a perfect accompaniment. The really interesting thing is, like, pay attention to where your food comes from. So this particular rice actually does come from India, so we got little green miles. But, you know, you've got to think about where food comes from and where water is and where it's appropriate. So a couple of things. Geography is one discussion point about green miles, but also in terms of quality and environmental impact. So another good thing about this product, Community Co, it actually also aligns with fair trading of food and actually brings the money back into the actual community and distributes that there. So do pay attention to some of the foods that you pick up and see if we can do better choices. Sometimes it's expensive, I understand, you can't always do it, but when you can, let's make those better choices. First thing, open it.
Yeah. So sometimes it's not always possible to make that decision about fair food and purchasing sustainably, because we don't always know where the food has come from. But certainly in Australia now, on any packaged food, it has to tell you the source of where the food was grown and processed. And this tin of tomatoes, for example, you can see that it's got the little meter down the side, and that says made in Australia from 100% Australian ingredients. So at least that's telling you that's an Australian product. But then, of course, we get into more detailed discussions about buying local and supporting local agri-food business. And we're really fortunate in the Illawarra and Shoalhaven that it is a pretty fertile area of New South Wales, and there is quite a lot of produce that's grown. And when we went to Planetary Co-op yesterday, they were telling us how they source locally.
And buy in bulk too, which is great.
And buy in bulk, that's it.
Perfect.
All right, so let's get this rice on the
Okay,
board.
so you can have the fancy cup measurement, or you can find your standard cup. The idea with absorption method is 1 cup of rice to 2 cups of water, and that's just the simplest way to put on rice. So that's what we'll be doing.
All right, so while Anne's putting on the rice, we're going to get started with the dal. I've got my recipe here, and you also have a recipe card. So I'm hoping that you're going to cook along with me. If not, you can always look later and cook later. So I've got all of my ingredients here. As you saw yesterday, we went to the Planetary Co-op and we bought the lentils, which we put into this container. And that's the main ingredient. And the reason why lentils are such a good nutritious food is that they're high in protein, and they're also pretty good for the planet, because when they grow, they actually fix nitrogen into the soil. So they actually bring nitrogen into the soil, and that reduces the need for fertilizers to improve soil health. So good for their body and good for the planet. So the first thing we're going to do is chop our onion. So the recipe calls for 2 onions, but you can see the size of this.
That's a beauty.
Onion grown with no chemicals. So I'm going to get Anne to do the onion chopping job.
Wow, that'll be satisfying.
So we're going to cut the onion into, well, just dice it, finely dice it. It doesn't have to be a work of art. And I'll get going with getting some of the herbs started. So just about every good recipe has garlic in it. So this was some garlic I purchased yesterday. Trying to get
The other
into it.
interesting thing about the pulses is like the concept that, talk about permaculture or agroecology. It's really about growing the right crops and the right mixtures of crops. Really important indigenous cultures do it. Probably traditional old farmers have done it, but we've gone a lot to monocultures now, which really is detrimental to the earth in so many ways. It's very resource intensive, uses a lot of oil, a lot of water, and what you said, fertilizer. So getting good understanding of crop rotation, the mixture of crops, and reducing tillage, all really important parts of production of food that we're revisiting now in terms of
and I mean in Australia our agriculture system is probably a lot more sustainable than other countries such as the US, where they have these massive monocrops and they just keep growing the same corn.
Just using the FOGO bin.
Oh yes, so that brings me to talk about waste, which we were going to talk about a bit later, but as you can see, Anne's just put her vegetable produce into the FOGO bin. So we're fortunate here in the Illawarra that we have FOGO, which is food, organics, green organics, and hopefully most households have now been part of the rollout, where instead of having to compost your own waste from vegetable and organic material, you can put it into this bin, put it into your green bin, you don't even need to take it anywhere, with your garden waste, and this gets picked up once a week. So we really have no excuse to be throwing things like this into the bin. So FOGO is brilliant for a couple of reasons. First of all, you can also put meat and chicken and anything that's organic into that bin. It doesn't just have to be fruits and vegetables. And everything that goes in here does not go to landfill. So the problem with putting food in the red bin is that it'll go to landfill and the food will start to ferment and produce methane gas. Okay.
It makes a big difference in terms of your rubbish too at the end of the week. If you start using it systematically, you'll find that you've got a lot more room in your red bin.
That's it.
And it's really important from the perspective about methane gas. I think I saw somewhere it was like, when you get half a head of lettuce and it's gone yucky, so you go, oh, I'm just chucking that out. It goes in the red bin. Heard it takes up to 25 years to break down. Like it's a big thing, and that's what do you expect from a green, nice little green vegetable like lettuce?
Well, that's it. And also, this actually goes into producing compost, and then councils sell that back to various people. So it helps the circular economy as well. So it just makes sense on all different levels. Just a word of warning though, I mean, if you keep your FOGO bin for too long and don't put it into the green bin, it does attract fruit flies. So it's recommended you put your food waste in with these compostable bags, and then layer it with garden waste so that you don't get all those flies and things like that. All right, so I've just mashed up, what's the right word when you do this? I've used the pestle and mortar to
love that.
To just mash up my garlic. If you don't have one of these, you can just take a clove. You don't even need to peel it really, and you can take a flat knife. My daughter's good at doing this. I'm not so good at it. And you can do it. You can do it that way, and Bob's your uncle, and then you can just chop that really finely. Okay, so we're just getting all the herbs ready. So I've got my garlic. Next thing I'm going to do, I may as well just use that. You know, I don't think there's any reason to be short on garlic. It says 3 cloves. I've put about 5 in there. The more garlic, the better, really. Garlic's an anti-inflammatory food, so it's also good for your body and gives a beautiful taste.
And it tastes terrific, which is another good thing.
All right, so next we do the ginger. I was hoping to give this job to Anne because I don't like grating ginger, but she's busy. So with fresh ginger, you can use dried ginger, or you can even get a paste, but I like to use the fresh ginger. So just cut off the gnarly ends, and then I take my peeler and just peel off the outside of the ginger that's kind of not very nice. Any kind
Big
of
woody,
hard,
got some fibre, but probably not
any
most
hard
digestible.
woody bits you get off. Sometimes I just use a knife and cut a bit off that way. So try and get all that peel off, get it nice and smooth. Okay, so you can see I've taken off all the peel, and now you can just use a normal grater, but I have this fancy little grater here where you can just go like this. It takes a bit of effort. How are you going there with the huge onion, Anne?
It's like a
Giant onion.
melon of onion.
Okay, once you're done with that, you can put the olive oil into the pan. And did you switch on the rice?
You did.
No, I didn't.
Oh. Okay. Well, that won't cook very well then.
Do you want the rice to boil, or do you want it just to reach boiling and then switch it off? What's your method?
I like boiling and switch off, but
Okay, so that's the absorption. You get it to boiling and then just switch it off. Don't take the lid off because all the steam will cook the rice, and it basically just does its own thing. So this is also a vegetarian recipe and also vegan. So it's quite interesting that there is a bit of a movement, I would say, or popularity around plant-based eating at the moment. And again, that can be healthy and good for you if you choose the right foods in your plant-based eating diet. So in 2019, something came out called the Eat Lancet Planetary Health Diet. And that was a huge consortium of experts around the world that tried to do modelling to see what is a healthy and sustainable diet, first of all, because we didn't really know what that was. Because, of course, we have to balance nutrition with principles of sustainability and try and get that sweet spot where, you know, we're not cutting out nutrients or foods that actually are really good for us, but at the same time, we're balancing the act with the planetary health boundaries, because obviously the planet has limited boundaries, has limited land, has limited water, has limited soil, and we want to reduce energy consumption.
totally. And the use of oil in the production system.
So the planetary health diet is a kind of flexitarian approach. Everybody seems to think it's a vegetarian diet. It doesn't have to be a vegetarian diet, but it does encourage less consumption of meat, because meat and dairy products are actually very heavy on creating greenhouse gas emissions. So in their production, There's a lot of carbon dioxide that is used, but or emitted from the production. And in agricultural production, cattle are producers of methane gas, and we were talking about the methane gas before.
Yeah.
So it is encouraged to eat less meat, but not necessarily no meat. So we'll talk about that a little bit further down the track. And what would you guess is the proportion of vegetarians in the country? How many people do you think are vegetarian in Australia?
Oh, I don't know, maybe 30%?
No, it's about 10%.
Oh, I thought the young people might be leading the charge a bit
No,
more.
I mean, it is becoming more popular to be plant-based, and of course there's been this huge explosion of plant-based meats on the market. I'm vegetarian, but I don't necessarily like the idea of eating synthetic meat. It doesn't do anything for me, but it is a gap in the market for perhaps those people that are trying to cut down on meat.
Yeah.
You
I
have
mean,
to be
also
careful.
to think about, the cost of that, because that's quite synthesised and, again, resource intensive, so not always the better choice.
All right, so I said this is a one-pot meal, so I like to use a wok, but you can just use a deep pan if you like, or if you've got a deep frying pan, it doesn't really matter. It does make quite a lot, so you need a pretty big container. Right, so Anne, your rice is boiling. I'm going to switch it off.
I got my lovely Australian extra virgin olive oil.
Yeah, so this recipe calls for olive oil, but you can use any oil that you have in your cupboard. It doesn't really matter.
I don't have any wrist powder though.
Oh. Gosh.
Oh,
There we
look
go.
at that.
Look at that. All right, so how much olive oil are we using? It says a teaspoon, but that seems, again, a bit...
Light on to me.
Yeah, I normally just drizzle it.
I would too.
Okay, so you're in charge of that. All right, so we've got the onion's going to be cooked for 5 minutes. We're going to add the garlic, ginger. I've got a little habanero red chili. You can use whatever kind of chili you want. If you want it hot, leave the seeds in. I am not going to leave the seeds in because this is a really hot chili anyway without the seeds. Again, you could use dried chili flakes if you prefer, if you don't have fresh chili. This recipe is good because you can kind of use whatever you've got in the cupboard in terms of flavouring. So I'll try and chop it really small because we don't want big, huge chunks. Oh, are you having trouble?
I think I'm on.
You are? Okay.
Is that
It's always difficult cooking in somebody else's kitchen. Okay, so I'm cutting this really small.
I mean, it's interesting too because some more researchers that, we're talking about Flexitarian, that animals do have a really important role in farming as well. Like having that mixed method of farming, as long as they aren't overgrazing and are moved around, they're actually quite good for the soil. So it's not one size fits all. We don't all have to go vegetarian.
No, and I mean, that's a really good point. Last week I got my students in epidemiology actually to debate whether all Australians need to go vegetarian to save the planet. And we had a for and against, and there were some really good arguments. And the main argument against that is because, animal foods are so high in nutrition.
Micronutrients particularly.
And of course, Australia is actually a food producing country. We don't import a whole load of food. And again, some of our farming practices are much better. Like if we have grazing cattle, they're actually higher in nutrients because they're grazing, but they're also using land that already, absorbs water from rain rather than having to be fed grain also that takes a lot of water. So you have to be context specific. You can't just say, right, I'm cutting out this, and you can't take data from, let's say, America or Europe, because Australia has very different climatic conditions. So
And different ways of growing meat too. We don't tend to grain feed much except for export.
That's right. We've just recently published a paper looking at the environmental impact of how Australians eat, so based on actual eating rather than modelling. And it's very interesting that, of course, meat and dairy come out as big or heavy hitters in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, but so did discretionary foods. So things like crisps, biscuits, all those extras in the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, they're accounting for about 20% of environmental impact. So, if you really want to be eating more healthy and sustainably, you need to be cutting out all those junk foods.
Well, that's good
as
news
well.
from a nutrition perspective, because that's where all the extra fats and salts and that impact on your health as well as on the environment. The junk
Okay,
foods.
so we've got garlic, ginger, chili all mixed in there. And that's for you.
Thank you. I'm just waiting for it to heat up.
What I'm doing now is just coriander seeds, mustard seeds I love for curries, and coriander seeds. So you might remember we bought these from Planetary in this recycled jar. So these are coriander seeds. Again, if you don't have, oh, I think I already put some of that in. Coriander, what have I not put in? Okay, we're going to have extra coriander, cumin. So this was the cumin I bought, but I've also got ground cumin. So again, just use whatever you've got in your cupboard if you don't have the actual. Of course, you can always use fresh as well. So what we're doing is we're just going to grind this. Get my...
Really interesting science on the antibacterial and anti-inflammatory perspectives of some of these herbs too. So not only flavour, but some health benefits.
Yeah, we're learning more and more about bioactives, what we call bioactives in herbs and spices and plant foods. So we used to just think it was nice for taste, but now we know they have all sorts of great properties, anti-inflammatory properties. Oh, quite hard getting this ground. I mean, the benefit of using it already ground is you don't have to do this, but hopefully it's fresh. You could also put this in a zizzer, like a NutriBullet or a liquidizer. It might be quicker, but it's quite a small amount. Okay, I think that's just about done it. All right, so we're going to put this in with the onion. We also need garam masala. And one of the tips is if you don't have all of these herbs, you can just substitute and use 3 teaspoons of garam masala. So garam masala is kind of a ready-made mix of herbs. So because we've got the others, I'm going to use 1 teaspoon, maybe just a little bit extra. And turmeric I have got here. So we're going to have 2 teaspoons. 1, 2. And we're going to put this in to Anne's concoction over there. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, please.
That good stuff out. Yummo. The smell. Love it.
Okay, all right, we're cooking now.
Certainly are. That smells great.
All right, so now what I'm going to do is, well, Anne's, it's always good to have a person to help in the kitchen, so she's stirring. I'm going to get the lentils ready. So we need 1 cup of red split lentils. Now the beauty about these is you don't have to soak them, but you do have to rinse them just to get some of that starch off.
Yeah,
So-
I've had a old-fashioned recipe the other day, and I think about they were really smart, even back whenever they were thinking about water conservation. When they were soaking the lentils, they said save the water and put it in your garden. So
I'm just going to rinse these lentils.
this smells so yummy.
So talking about water, that's why it's important to eat things that are in season. Because you know you don't want to have to irrigate plants when they're not in season.
Shane, you can't smell this. This smells amazing.
All right, so now we're using the tomato with their juice. Tinned tomatoes, everyone should have tinned tomatoes in their cupboard always because you can't go wrong with tinned tomatoes.
And sometimes if you forget your tomatoes and they've got a bit crappy in your fridge, don't throw them out. Throw them into your various dishes instead of your tinned tomatoes.
Yeah, did you know you can freeze just about any vegetable? Maybe not lettuce and cucumber, but you can, if your veggies are going a little bit off, you can blanch them and then throw them in the freezer and then cook them all up for a really great stock.
Yum.
Which brings me to the stock for this recipe. We're actually not going to make our own. We're going to use a commercial stock. I haven't had time to make my own, so
All that one particularly is using all Australian vegetables. Again, I paid attention to the
made from scratch. So there we go. Made in Australia from at least 99% Australian ingredients. There we go. And it even tells you on the front, so that's a good signpost. How much do we need? 2 cups. You ready for me?
I'm ready. Good.
1, 2. So what else do we need? We need the coconut milk.
My husband asked me this morning, did I know how to make dal?
Oh.
Coming from the Pacific Islands, he knows how to make dal, so it wasn't quite game that I would know how to do it. I was in good hands, I told him.
Okay, coconut milk goes straight in.
Organic.
This is what we bought at the Flame Tree
Nice.
yesterday, certified organic. So
Okay.
you know that most coconuts come from the Pacific Islands, so
do
we don't actually
indeed.
grow coconuts here. So this is one of those products you can't have Australian produce. Does it tell us where it comes from?
It says Eco Farm, so that's good.
Oh, Philippines.
Yeah.
We don't grow eco farms, but that's really good.
Yeah.
So
I think that gives back to the community as well.
okay, have I
All those
missed
little
anything?
decisions. I don't think
Let's
so.
just make sure I've got everything. Oh, season with salt and pepper. So it's always good to have a bit of ground pepper in there. And a bit of ground salt. If you are going to use salt in cooking, make sure you get iodized salt. Iodized, contains iodine.
Very important, particularly in the Australian environment, because we're very low on iodine in our soil, so that means that our population can be low in iodine. It's a particularly problematic issue, particularly in pregnancy. We want our population to have sufficient iron. Micronutrient, tiny amounts, but really important impact on body health.
All right, so Anne, we just need to cook that on a low heat. So perhaps we'll put the lid on for about 15 to 20 minutes.
Looking good.
Okay,
Smells
so we just
terrific.
need it to be bubbling away. And now we can move on to our second part of the meal.
Wouldn't that smell good?
So while that dal is cooking, we also add some spinach leaves. I'll just rinse these. These are baby spinach leaves.
Can we do that while you do
Yes,
that?
please, which we just put in right at the end, otherwise
Limp.
they go limp. You just want them to wilt at the end. And then we'll put some lemon juice on top. So I'm just going to move all of this stuff out of the way now because we're finished. Oh, I did want to show you this. So nowadays, if you don't have time to make rice from scratch, there are these really nifty little cups that essentially you put in the microwave for 60 seconds. You open it up, and my daughter uses these a lot, and it's a single serve of rice, and you can get multi-grain blends. So that's an alternative if you don't have time to make rice from scratch. Right, so Anne, you're going to lead me in this one, and you're going to tell me what to do.
Oh, God. Very brave. I'm better at this support
Okay.
chef role.
So we do need to have the this
Nice and clean and dry.
dry because we're going to be rolling out the dal. Not
Naan.
naan bread. We're going to be rolling it out with flour. So we need a clean container. I mean, you know what I mean, bench. Okay. Right.
Great.
So
1 cup of all-purpose plain flour, please.
So this is a great recipe because it's only got 4 ingredients.
Love that.
So
I can cope with that.
they all seem to be white and blue in the packaging. Flour, plain flour, baking powder, salt, and Greek yogurt. So it's important that the yogurt's
Oh, that's a nice
not
yogurt.
flavoured.
Yum.
It can be Greek, it can be plain, but just not a flavoured one. All right, so talk us through what we have to do.
Okay, 1 cup of all-purpose flour, and you put all the ingredients in one hit. Easy, into one bowl. So 1 cup of all-purpose flour plain, 1 1/4 cups of plain yogurt, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt.
Okay, I'm just looking for my mixing bowl because we have to knead it, don't we?
Yep.
So this is a good recipe because you don't have to wait for it to rise because it's yeast free. So I'm presuming the bacteria in the yogurt helped to
Yeah, must do.
get it ready for proofing. All right, we're ready.
Okay, 1 cup of your flour.
1 cup. How many does this make?
6 equal pieces.
6. So that serves 6. This serves 6.
Okay.
I mean, if I was making it for my family, I'd probably do double because we like to have
Blood bread.
a couple of naans.
Yum, I love naan. Yummy. Didn't know it was that easy, to be honest, to make naan.
Oh, I've not made it before, so we'll see. Okay, 1 cup.
Yes, 1 1/4 cups of plain yogurt.
Oh, 1 1/4 cups plain yogurt. Right, so okay, this looks
It
good.
looks like it's set in a pot. That is
1
nice.
1/4 cups. So I wonder how I'm gonna do that. Like
I
that.
think that's about right for a quarter, just the same.
Oh no, this is a full.
Yeah, no, but I mean that.
Oh, okay. So I'm just squashing it in. That's 1.
Yum. I could eat that yogurt straight away.
I know. And then a 1/4 cup, probably like. So the recipe says don't put too much in because you can always add if it's too
Yeah.
dry.
Okay.
You can't take it out if it's too wet.
2 teaspoons of baking powder.
2 teaspoons of baking powder. Alrighty.
And
1. I always count when I'm measuring out because sometimes I lose count of how many I've done, especially if it's lots too.
a 1/4 teaspoon of salt.
Alright, so I would just be putting that in.
Okay. You probably need to use your hands to bring it all together. Knead it for a minute or so in the bowl until it comes together in a fairly sticky ball. If necessary, add a little more flour to make it manageable.
So am I kneading it?
Yes.
Okay. Taking my rings off, washing my hands.
That's it. Smelling amazing.
Okay, is this looking right, do you think? It's looking
well, it
very
says sticky.
sticky.
It's supposed
What
to be
does it
sticky.
say? Does it?
It says it comes together in a fairly sticky ball.
Okay, it's not really a ball yet.
You may need a little bit more flour perhaps to make it a little bit more manageable. That's what it says.
Okay. It's supposed to kind of rise up and be fluffy.
Yeah. Ooh, I'm loving this now.
Oh, you got it going now.
Yeah. Definitely do not need a rolling pin, I'm just saying.
Really?
No. That just complicates the whole matter.
Oh, it's cooking. Amazing.
Definitely the flour, extra flour is required. Especially if you've got really thick yogurt, which we did. Oh, this is yummy. Well, I assume it's yummy. It's so light, I can feel it really light under my hand, so.
Oh,
So
amazing.
excited?
Looks like the real thing.
Oh, of course it does.
You're
I definitely will.
doing an online cooking show. It's always good to try something new.
It's more fun when you cook with somebody, that's for sure.
Yeah. What do you reckon?
Oh yeah, that's ready to come off. You raise your plates. Yeah?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's definitely
That one's done.
on the done side.
Okay, so you ready for the next one? You're
Yeah.
supposed to just roll them as you're cooking. So
They're
don't
all ready.
flatten them down because they're supposed to puff up a bit.
Okay, well, they're on their way.
Okay, it's kind of smoking, so I'm going to just
Turn down a bit.
turn it down a bit, but also just rinse this pan before the next one's cooked. Okay, so we don't want them to burn. I've just left that lid off, Anne, because I wanted it to thicken up a bit. Wow.
Must be close to the timer. Is that the timer?
Oh! No, that's because you've taken that pan off. Hang on, the timer, it's got 2 minutes left. Okay, next one. Where's my flipper? So we'll just need to bring the pan over as we're finding out. I mean, you don't have to make these to go with it. The dal and the rice is more than enough, but I just thought it might be fun to try something.
Oh, I love naan. I have new respect for my fellow Indian supporters who know how to do this properly. They're probably laughing at us right now. What a mess they're going. Oh, they're ready. Oh, lovely. Look at that. Now we're getting it.
I kind of like the uneven shape, you know?
Yeah.
No two naan breads are the same, which I kind of
Fortunately, I
like.
can help you out with that.
I mean, I do have some store-bought ones we could have used, but that's
No.
like not part of the fun.
No.
Where are my store-bought ones? Somewhere in here. Use chopped spinach. This just adds a bit of greenery.
The spinach is quite prolific at the moment.
It is.
Seasonal. Oh, that smells like tuna. Oh no.
Okay.
Catch it. Watch out, Karen, I'm coming behind you.
Okay, so we've got to do one last thing with this dal. We have to do the spinach, but also squeeze half a lemon into
Oops,
it.
coming behind.
So I just need my knife. We got rid of all the knives, didn't we?
Feels wrong not to have oil in this pan, but that's
I know. I suppose it wouldn't puff up if we had oil. So I'm putting in my half a lemon.
Fresh taste.
Okay. So just a couple of minutes for the spinach to wilt. I'll put the lid back on, I reckon.
Yeah, that's it off. Turn the heat off and let it continue.
I'll just let. I think it's time to check the rice. It's been 25 minutes.
Good idea.
So I haven't taken the lid off yet. But we could. Oh yeah, fluffy.
Good stuff.
So basmati rice is traditional Indian rice. I think it's quite a long grain.
That was fantastic. I'm super hungry now, and I don't know if anyone was cooking along, but definitely they'll be cooking it after. So the recipe is in the chat. Thank you so much, Karen and Anne. Sorry, Karen, you're on mute.
Thanks, Belinda. I'm really keen for us to have a little bit of time for questions, so perhaps we can go straight to the community garden now, because we have
I
to
can
see
play the community
garden.
garden. I
Yeah.
can lead us with that if you want to
Oh,
questions now.
yeah. Okay, let's take some questions. I'll let Anne can field some questions because we
Anyone
haven't
have
heard
any
from Anne yet.
Question for Anne, just unmute or pop up your hand.
Well, I just want to say it's really easy and it's heaps of fun when you actually cook with someone. So I definitely encourage you to give this recipe a go. I really liked it. Flavors was amazing. Smell was amazing.
I was
And Yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Anne. I was actually going to ask, there can be some perceptions that healthy food or organic food is a lot more expensive. And I was wondering what your thoughts were around this equity divide and how the lower socioeconomic can afford to eat this way. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think there's always trade-offs, and I think what we should be doing is engaging with understanding where our food comes from and understanding the processes that are involved in it. And I think that enables us to make some better choices when we can afford them. I think mentioned that a couple of times. I've talked about some of the foods that you can make better choices when you can afford them. I mean, equity is a big issue around our food system in general, to be honest. And certainly, I think what we would like people to be aware of is that food security is actually a big issue here in Australia. We kind of think it's a global issue somewhere elsewhere, but particularly during the pandemic, we're quite aware that there's been, families, particularly single family, parent families, are really been struggling with food. So places like Food Bank have been really important. So there's some obvious choices we want people to make, but obviously we also have to be aware of those choices that might impact people's budget. Lentils, fortunately, is pretty cheap. So.
If I could just give a shout out to UOW, who did an amazing job during the lockdown of providing food and food packages for our students. I'd just like to acknowledge that they were really a leader in that regard. Very proud of what UOW did for our students.
Yeah, and actually we had a really amazing group of professional staff that really drove that, to be honest. They really came together and then reached out to community, and it was a very important part also of engaging with community and supporting community, and we do that best around food, I think. I think Edward's got a question.
Yeah, thanks. That was amazing. Really enjoyed the banter in the kitchen there. It was really good. I was just going to ask, we're hearing about food, that's not going to be picked in Australia at the moment, these labour shortages as a result of COVID. And, it just seems incredible that we can mobilise people when we need to around things like, sending people off to overseas to go and fight with each other or things like that. But when it comes to food, I was just imagining if I was a young person again, you'd probably go and do a couple of months of picking of fruit and veg and living with other young people and, having a wonderful time. I can't imagine it could be so difficult, but we seem to have these stories now where we sort of seem to rely on exploitation of workers from overseas coming and picking our fruit and vegetables. It just seems incredible, doesn't it? So I don't know if you've got any thoughts about that at the moment. It seems quite topical.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Edward. I mean, I did notice during the week there was a response from the government where they're actually releasing public servants to go to be part of their outback picking routine, and they've opened that opportunity up to the members in the public service group. It's a bit, I guess, it's almost like a war effort, like you're alluding to, where we're literally moving people into other areas. I think it's a really important concept to discuss is that disconnection from food supply, and I think that's a large part of our issue with the broader younger group, perhaps, that they're so used to rocking into the supermarket and picking up strawberries 24/7, 365 days a year. Their knowledge base of what goes into that, where it comes from, and what's required to be there in the supermarket is limited. So I guess that's one of our particular passions, Karen and I, is to try and get people more aware of what's in their local regional area, and also being aware of where food comes from, like I said. And then with that, you might get some passion, recognition and engagement. And that's what we really want.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Anne and Ed. And it is a crying shame that so much food has to go to waste when especially when it's nutritious fruits and vegetables. I think it starts with young people and particularly children. I think by the time kids get to university, they've already become quite set, often in their food habits. In America, most primary school children get to go to visit farms within their curriculum. It's a big, and we've just done a review that showed these experiential experiences really help them. So, I mean, I would be lobbying that all primary schools should have a food garden, and that children should be working in that food garden and learning how to cook the produce, seeing how it's grown. And I think that's the only way we're going to get kids, they're the next generation. They're the ones that are going to be left with all of the mess that our generation has created, unfortunately. So I don't know what other people think about that, but I think that would be the way forward. But of course, we need to get into the school curriculum, and we need, education to support that.
Yeah, and I guess we're going to have a look at it in a minute. Community gardens are really important. They're connect people socially as well as through food, and I think that's been a lovely one also now being developed in Woonona, which was it's a new one during lockdown. It's been I think people again wanting to access, and it's also access to land, Crown land, local government land that's basically sitting there that's maybe not used for other purposes. That's a really good use to, again, engage people, get them connected with where food is grown, how it's grown, and get them excited about it. Yeah, kids, I think, love it. They love getting their hands dirty. We were just thinking about when I was making those naan breads, reminded me when I was a kid making mud pies. Love that idea, get my hands dirty.
Thank you so much, gorgeous ladies, not only for sharing your so much time went into this session prior, but just also being such an educational session. Just the beautiful interconnection of health and climate and discussion around our environment and food was thoroughly enjoyable. Thank you so much. Thank you for those coming along. Hopefully we'll see you at other sessions throughout the week. I'm just going to take us out with a look at the UW Pulse Community Gardens, which Karen stumbled upon as we were discussing what this session might look like. So we're really excited about how we might engage with this future with our students. Thanks, everyone.
My name's Lauren. I'm the president of the UOW Community Garden Club. I'm currently a UOW student studying a Bachelor of Mathematics Education, and I just come here to have a bit of a break from study and to help grow the community.
So Lauren, how long has the garden actually been going?
So our garden's about 1 year old. We started late last year due to the COVID lockdown. We wanted a way to have international students in particular to be able to get involved with different community members and to have an outlet in a COVID safe way where they could meet new people and learn new skills.
So I believe that the garden's open to not just students but also staff and even community members. How many students do you think you've got as members?
So at the moment we have about 150 members. However, we only probably have about 10 or 20 active members who come regularly. We also have UOW students, staff members, and wider community members. So Rotary Corrimal are quite active, and we have quite a few community members who are very involved in the garden.
What kind of things do you grow here, Lauren? Vegetables, plants?
So at the moment we have a range of different things growing at the garden. We have a lot of plants and vegetables, but we also do our own composting and have our own worm farms. So the vegetables we grow change because we rotate them as the seasons go by. At the moment we've just planted corn, tomato, and we have a lot of bok choy, spinach and different leafy greens. Different benefits to coming down to the garden. The main one is as learning different skills, gardening skills, but we also have students can take any food that we grow, and there's also the sense of community. We're really focused at developing community connections between UOW staff, students, the wider community. We have a whole range of age groups at the moment, and it's also a sense of exercise, fresh air, good for the mental health, just to take a step back from uni and to get involved with something for the greater good.
Wonderful. Thanks everyone for coming. See you during the week.